I never thought my own daughter would look me in the eye and say something that would make me feel like less than nothing. Then you're just taking up space. That's what she shouted, sharp, loud, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. I had just told her I couldn't watch the kids anymore. My knees were swollen, my back was on fire, and my doctor warned me last week that I needed rest. Karen didn't want to hear it. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer a chair or a glass of water. She stood in that shiny kitchen I helped her remodel, marble countertops, new appliances, all of it bought with money from my retirement, and told me I was useless. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just walked to the guest room, the one they started calling the kids' playroom, when I wasn't supposed to be listening, and quietly packed my things. My shoes, my pills, my crosswords, my dignity. Noah, her oldest, stood at the top of the stairs watching me. He didn't say anything, but his eyes followed every movement. That boy loves me. I know he does. But he's 13, what could he do? I rolled my suitcase down the hallway like a stranger leaving a hotel. No hugs. No goodbyes. The door clicked shut behind me. I didn't have a plan. That's the funny part. For someone who used to organize school fundraisers and bake sales with military precision, I had absolutely no idea where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. You don't stay where you're not wanted. I sat down on the cold bench by the mailboxes outside their subdivision. Same place where I used to sit waiting for the school bus with the kids. Back when they still said, "Grandma," and ran into my arms like I was magic. That magic ran out, apparently. And I must have been the last one to notice. The wind bit through my sweater, but I didn't move. I stared straight ahead, blinking slow and steady, the way I used to when Tom, my late husband, would say something wise and hard to hear. He used to say, "Ellie, don't let people mistake your kindness for weakness." Well, Tom, they did. She did. And now, I was sitting here with a suitcase full of memories and nowhere to go. But here's the thing. Sometimes, when everything you've built gets torn away, you finally get to see the foundation underneath. And mine? Wasn't gone. Just buried. I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't just taking up space. I was about to take something back. I sat on that cold metal bench with my little rolling suitcase beside me like it was my last anchor to the world. I had nowhere to be, and yet, every part of me was screaming to go, anywhere but back into that house. Funny, isn't it? You spend your whole life building a family, and one day you wake up to find you were the help, not the foundation. I looked down at my pension card, turning it over in my hands like it might suddenly solve my life for me. It didn't. It just reminded me how small I'd become. How I'd shrunk myself into their lives so neatly, so quietly, they forgot I ever had one of my own. When Tom died, I thought I'd never feel whole again. Karen was the one who convinced me to move in. "It'll be good for the kids, for you, Mom," she said, like it was a blessing. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. And at first, it was good. I baked with the kids. I helped with homework. I folded tiny socks and warmed bottles and found my purpose again. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being Mom or Grandma. I became the nanny, the maid, the live-in cook, and today, I became just taking up space. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a photo, Tom in his fishing hat, grinning like a fool, holding up a fish he never caught. I used to tease him about that picture. Now I clung to it like a lifeline. "Don't let them box you in, Ellie," he used to say. "You're not made for small corners." Well, Tom, I sure let myself get boxed in, didn't I? A woman walked her dog past me and offered a polite nod. I nodded back. Just another old lady on a bench. Invisible, harmless, disposable. Except I wasn't. Not anymore. I didn't feel angry yet. Not fully. What I felt was numb. Like grief, but flatter. Like the moment right before a storm hits, where everything's still but charged. I pulled out my phone. I had one number I could call. Just one. "Lena?" I said when she answered. There was a pause. Then her voice. Warm, surprised, familiar. "Ellie? Oh, honey. What's wrong?" I need a place to think. Just for a little while." She didn't hesitate. "Come over. Right now." And just like that, the cold around me cracked open a little. A sliver of warmth. A sliver of hope. I stood up, dragging my little suitcase behind me. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, but I knew this much. I was done sitting quietly on anyone's bench. It started like love, like family. That's what still haunts me. 2 years ago, Karen had called me on a Sunday afternoon. I remember it because I was folding laundry and watching a rerun of Jeopardy! Tom used to love shouting the answers at the screen like they could hear him. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking, why don't you come live with us? It'll be good for the kids. And for you. You'll never have to be alone." Alone. That word was like a knife back then. The house had been too quiet without Tom. Too clean. Too cold. I missed being needed. I missed being someone's reason for getting out of bed. So when she said come, I did. I sold the condo. Gave away half the furniture. I even sold Tom's tools, God forgive me, and put the money into the house expansion. "More space for the kids," she said. "In your own room, Mom. We'll make it comfortable." And it was, at first. I baked cookies with Noah and read bedtime stories to Emma and Max. I helped with science projects and band-aids and late-night fevers. I made Sunday breakfasts and packed lunches and, for a while, I felt home again. But slowly, the tone changed. "Mom, can you just fold the laundry while I'm out? Did you run the dishwasher? Why isn't the laundry started yet?" I became part of the house, like the fridge or the vacuum. Always there, always working, but no one asked how I was doing. No one noticed if I skipped dinner or limped through the day with aching joints. I was helpful, but invisible. I never said anything. I thought, this is just life now. I told myself, you're being useful. That's what matters. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The tipping point, though? That was the Christmas before last. I spent weeks knitting Karen a shawl in the exact shade of green she loves. Wrapped it in silver paper, put it under the tree. When she opened it, she barely looked at it. "Oh, thanks," she said, setting it aside before moving on to something George bought her on Amazon. No hug, no smile, not even a second glance. That's when it clicked. I wasn't Mom anymore. I was staff. Staff don't get thanked. Staff don't get celebrated. That Christmas night, I cried quietly in my room. I didn't want to ruin the holiday. I didn't want to be that mother, the one who makes everything about her. But I made a promise to myself that night, if it ever gets worse, if they ever cross that line again, I won't stay silent. And 2 years later, with 5 words, "You're just taking up space," Karen handed me the final reason I needed. Lena didn't ask questions when she saw me on her porch. She just opened the door wide and said, "Come in, Ellie." That's it. No judgment, no confusion, just an open door and a heart that hadn't forgotten me. I didn't realize I was crying until she hugged me. You know, the kind of hug that makes you melt, the kind that reminds you you're still a person, not a task? That was Lena. Her porch hadn't changed. The same creaky swing. The same chipped flower pots with herbs that probably hadn't been watered in a week. It smelled like rosemary and old wood, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I sat on her couch, and she handed me a cup of tea like we were back in our old neighborhood, like it hadn't been years since we shared a kitchen table and complaints about our husbands snoring. She waited. Let me speak in my own time. So I told her everything, not the pretty version I used to tell at church. Not the, "I'm blessed, just tired," nonsense. I told her how Karen had turned me into a built-in babysitter. How George barely said hello anymore. How I sold my own home to help them renovate theirs. When I said, "She told me I'm just taking up space," Lena didn't gasp or say, "No," like most people would. She just nodded. "I always told you Karen was too comfortable with your kindness." That hit hard. Because Lena had warned me before. She had seen the way Karen dismissed my efforts even when Tom was alive. But I had defended her. I said, "She's just stressed." I said, "She means well." I don't say those things anymore. That night, Lena showed me to the guest room. It smelled like lavender and old quilts. There was a little dresser and a lamp with a cracked shade, and it felt more like home than my room in Karen's house ever had. "Stay as long as you need," she said. "And Ellie?" I looked up. "You don't owe anyone your peace." That sentence, it settled into my bones. Because somewhere along the way, I started believing that being a good mother meant giving up everything. My time, my comfort, my money, my rest, that I had to earn my space in their lives. But sitting there, in that small room with the soft quilt and the quiet, I felt something return. Not anger, not revenge, just ownership. Of my breath, my body, my future. That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for taking up space. I just felt safe. The next morning, Lena and I sat in her little kitchen, the sun stretching through the window like it still believed in second chances. She poured tea into those old mismatched mugs she'd never thrown out, and we sat without rush, like the world could wait. I always meant to ask, she said, stirring her tea, did you ever put anything in writing when you moved in with Karen? I blinked. Writing? No, I said slowly. It was all verbal. Family, you know? I sold my condo, gave them the money for the expansion. Bought the appliances, helped with the flooring, but we never wrote anything down. Lena's spoon clinked once against the side of her cup, then went still. You never saw the deed? She asked. I shook my head. Karen said the house was still in their name. The new addition was ours in spirit. Ours, Lena repeated, like she was tasting the word and finding it sour. That word had sounded so warm before. Now it felt like a blanket someone had yanked away in the middle of the night. I looked down at my hands. Wrinkled, tired, aching with age and effort. Those hands had folded their laundry, washed their dishes, rocked their babies. And now, they trembled at the thought that maybe, just maybe, I'd handed over everything for nothing. I even gave her Tom's tools, I said softly. She said George could use them. Said it would help the family. I remembered standing in the garage, wrapping those tools in bubble wrap, whispering an apology to Tom like a prayer. He'd kept them in perfect condition. Said a man's tools outlive him if you take care of them. And I gave them away like they were nothing. Lena leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Ellie, if you funded that extension, and there's no paperwork saying you gave it as a gift, then it may not be as simple as she thinks. What do you mean? I mean, legally, Karen might not be the only one with a claim to that house. A quiet beat passed between us. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels full. Like a seed being planted. I sat there, trying to process the idea. That maybe I wasn't completely powerless. That maybe I hadn't just been used, I had been robbed. Not with force, but with smiles and obligations and the slow erosion of self. I stared at the steam rising from my mug and whispered, I never wanted to fight her. Lena reached over and placed her hand on mine. You're not fighting, Ellie. You're remembering you exist. And just like that, the question shifted inside me, from how did this happen? To what can I still take back? Mr. Parker hadn't changed a bit. Same tidy little office with dark green carpet and too many law books stacked like towers no one ever touched. Same coffee maker humming in the corner. Same manila folders stacked neatly like he knew exactly where every secret was buried. He stood when I walked in. Eleanor, he said warmly. It's been a while. It has, I said, offering a tight smile. Tom always said you were the only man he trusted with a pen. Mr. Parker chuckled. Your husband had good instincts. Sit down. Tell me what's going on. So I did. I told him about the house. About the extension. About the money from the condo sale, the tools, the appliances, the groceries. About the years I spent trading my savings for scraps of affection. About the moment Karen looked me in the eye and told me I was just taking up space. He listened, jotting down notes, occasionally nodding. No interruptions. Just the quiet sound of a man preparing to unravel a mess that had gone unnoticed far too long. When I finished, he looked over the papers I'd brought, bank statements, the wire transfer for the condo sale, a few receipts for major purchases. Then he sat back, steepled his fingers, and said the words that sent a jolt through my chest. She doesn't legally own that extension if the funds came from you and there's no documentation showing it was a gift. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, he said calmly, if you paid for those renovations and they weren't formally gifted, you may have grounds to reclaim part of the property or at the very least, seek reimbursement. My mouth went dry. But it's her house. Not all of it, he said. Not if what you're telling me is true. Not if your money built half of it. It was the first time in weeks, maybe months, that I felt something other than tired. I felt awake. What would I need? I asked. Everything, he said. Receipts, bank statements, photos, any text messages, emails, anything that shows your contributions. I nodded. My mind was already flipping through years of mental files. And Eleanor, he added gently, this doesn't have to be war. We'll ask her first. Give her a chance to do the right thing. But if she doesn't, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Because for the first time since that awful afternoon in Karen's kitchen, I saw a glimmer of something I hadn't dared to feel. Leverage. I left Mr. Parker's office with a folder under my arm, and a fire lit low in my chest. They wanted me quiet. They forgot I was still her mother. And I hadn't said my piece yet. The library smelled like dust and old paper, like a place where forgotten things lived. I settled into one of the computer kiosks, clutching the folder Mr. Parker had given me like it was a weapon. And maybe it was. Not a loud one, but the kind you wield with quiet precision. Take your time, the librarian said, nodding toward the printer. If you need help, just ask. Bless her. She didn't know I was about to print the receipts for my resurrection. I pulled up my bank account first. Years of transactions, transfers, and auto payments. Some were tiny, $65 here, $80 there. Groceries, diapers, emergency field trip money. But others hit hard. $12,000 for the home edition. $3,500 for kitchen appliances. $900 for a water heater they claimed was for everyone's comfort. I printed everything. Page after page, the numbers stacked up like bricks I had laid, one by one, for a home I was now shut out of. Then came the texts. I scrolled through my phone, screenshotting anything useful. One from Karen, joking, "Thanks for funding my dream kitchen, Mom." Another, asking me to lend money for the furniture we'll both enjoy. And yet another, "Don't tell George, but your help saved us again this month." Saved. She said I saved them. Now I was disposable? I emailed all the screenshots to myself, saved them to a USB stick, and slipped it into my purse like it was state evidence. Which, in a way, it was. Then I did something that felt oddly intimate. I printed photos from my phone. Pictures of the new extension I helped pay for. The kids playing in the playroom. Karen posing in front of the marble countertops I bought. My hands stirring soup at the stove they said was too expensive for them to afford. Proof that I was there. That I built that space with my own 2 hands, and with the soft heart they took for weakness. Back at Lena's, I spread everything out on the kitchen table. She came in carrying laundry and froze. "My God," she whispered. "Ellie, that's your entire life in documents." "No," I said. "It's just 5 years. But it's enough." She sat across from me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of papers settling. Then she asked, "How do you feel?" I looked at the mess of receipts, photos, and printed texts. "Like I'm stealing my own life back," I said. And I was. One file, one screenshot, one forgotten bank line at a time. I was pulling the pieces of myself out of the fog. And I wasn't done yet. It was the cereal aisle. Isn't it always somewhere mundane? I was standing there, comparing oatmeal prices like I still had 3 kids to feed, when I heard my name. "Mrs. Whitmore?" I turned, and there was George. Karen's husband. The man who had once called me Mom when he asked for my blessing to propose. The same man who now barely looked up from his phone when I entered a room. He looked uncomfortable, not angry, just like someone caught in a lie they didn't fully agree with, but repeated anyway. "George," I said calmly, hands still wrapped around a box of plain oats. He scratched the back of his neck. "Karen told me you left because, well, you were upset about not watching the kids anymore. She said you took it personally." Took it personally? I almost laughed, but it got stuck in my throat. Karen was already rewriting the story, turning me from the backbone of her house into a sulky old woman who stormed out over a chore. I gave George a long look. "That's what she said?" "Yeah," he said, eyes shifting. "She's really upset. We all are. The kids miss you." I nodded. "Well, you can tell her I'm doing just fine." He blinked, not expecting that. Maybe he thought I'd beg for a visit. Maybe he was waiting for a guilt trip. Instead, I smiled and reached for the store-brand oatmeal, cheaper, but just as good. A habit I'd learned from budgeting their grocery lists. "How are the kids?" I asked, genuinely. "Nose quiet. Emma's been asking for you." That made my chest tighten. Emma's drawings were still folded in the side pocket of my suitcase, little stick figures labeled, "Me," and "Grandma." "Well," I said, placing the box in my cart, "tell them Grandma loves them very much." George shifted again. Karen also said, "You took some things from the house." "Some things I bought," I said simply. "Things I paid for. Things I gave when I thought I was family." There it was. His jaw tightened, just slightly. But he didn't argue. He couldn't. We stood in silence for a moment. Then I added, "You know, George, it's funny. I used to make you both dinner, rock your babies to sleep, pay your bills, and I still felt invisible." He looked down. "You didn't have to be part of that," I said. "But you were." He didn't defend himself, just nodded once. "Anyway," I said, pushing my cart forward, "I hope you get what you need." And I meant it. I truly did. Because for once, I wasn't the one who needed anything. I had my receipts. I had my strength. And soon, I'd have something better than a seat at their table. I'd have my story back. When the call came, I was sitting at Lena's kitchen table with a hot cup of tea and the smell of banana bread in the oven. A simple afternoon. But the voice on the phone changed everything. "Eleanor," Mr. Parker said, "we're ready to move forward." My heart skipped. "We've drafted a formal request," he continued. "Reimbursement or property adjustment. Nothing hostile, yet. But it will make your position clear." I stared at the notepad in front of me, where I'd scribbled down shopping lists and to-dos like a normal person. I wasn't a normal person anymore. Not in this story. "You think she'll respond?" He hesitated. "She'll have to." I thanked him and hung up. Lena walked in, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "That the lawyer?" I nodded. "He's giving Karen a chance to do the right thing." Lena raised an eyebrow. "That would be a first." I smiled, but there was a weight behind it. It felt strange, you know? Sitting there with my tea and homemade banana bread, while somewhere across town, a legal envelope was making its way into my daughter's world like a ghost she thought she buried. I wondered how she'd react. Would she scream? Would she cry? Would she play the victim, the martyr, the daughter who only wanted what was best? It didn't matter. That night, I slept. Not just tossed and turned sleep. Not that anxious, half-awake waiting for a text kind of sleep. I slept. Deep and clean and dreamless. Because for the first time in weeks, maybe months, my body understood it wasn't on alert anymore. I didn't have to tiptoe. I didn't have to cook dinner for people who saw me as a burden. I didn't have to wonder if I was overreacting or being sensitive or asking for too much. I had asked for nothing. And now I was taking back something. The next morning, I made breakfast just for me. Not 3 different versions for picky kids. Not coffee for George or almond milk for Karen. Just toast and jam, a strong cup of black coffee, and silence. Lena joined me later, and we sat without words, just the occasional clink of a spoon against ceramic. At one point, she said, "I haven't seen you this still in a long time." "Me neither," I replied. Because when you've spent years spinning to keep everyone else comfortable, stillness feels like rebellion. Like freedom. Let her receive the letter. Let her stew. Let her consult her Google searches and call 3 friends to rant about her ungrateful mother. Let her do it all. I had already made peace with the part of me that used to need her approval. That version of me? She finally got some sleep. 2 weeks later, I went back. Not to apologize. Not to talk. Just to take what was mine. I knew Karen was away at a leadership retreat, how ironic, and George would be working. The kids were with their aunt. The house would be empty. I had checked twice. Lena drove me. She offered to help, but I told her this was something I needed to do alone. When I stepped inside, the house was quiet, but not peaceful. More like hollow, like something had been removed from the walls. I moved slowly, room by room, pulling from memory. The blender I bought when Karen started making smoothies and couldn't afford a good one. The kitchen chairs Tom and I had bought for our condo, the ones she said fit the new vibe after the remodel. I unplugged them carefully, wrapped them in towels I'd brought from Lena's, packed them into boxes and stacked them by the front door. Next, I took the framed family photos, every one I paid to print, every one I bought the frames for. Karen always said she was too busy to get them developed. So I did. Of course I did. There was the armchair from my reading nook, the set of mixing bowls she borrowed when I first moved in, the throw blanket I crocheted during Tom's chemo days. Everything I had given in love was now coming home to me. And when I stepped into the addition, the sunroom I funded, tiled, painted, I took a long breath. It was beautiful, I'll admit that. The light poured in like honey. The plants thrived. The kids' toys were scattered on the floor like confetti. But I didn't feel warmth anymore. I felt the truth. This room existed because of me. And I had been erased from it. So I picked up what I could. The rug I bought, the bookshelf I'd assembled by hand, the the wind chimes from Tom's birthday trip to Santa Fe. I left the toys. I didn't take their childhood. Just my place in it. Before I left, I placed a single sheet of paper on the dining table. Just a note, written in pen. It said, "Not just taking up space." That was all. No threats. No begging. No guilt. Just a reminder that I was never the burden they claimed. I stepped outside, closed the door gently behind me, and felt no tremble in my hands. Lena was waiting in the car. She didn't say a word. Just nodded once as I loaded the last box into the trunk. As we drove away, I didn't look back. Let Karen find her sunroom a little dimmer. Her kitchen a little emptier. Her story a little cracked. She took everything for granted. I only took what was mine. Karen stormed into Mr. Parker's office like she owned the air in the room. Hair done, blazer crisp, heels tapping fast and loud. She didn't knock, just opened the door and said she had no right to take any of that. I didn't flinch. I was already sitting across from Mr. Parker, papers neatly spread on the table. My hands folded in my lap. Calm, still. He didn't look up right away. Just finished highlighting a sentence on the document in front of him, then said evenly, "Actually, Ms. Whitmore, your mother was within her rights." Karen's mouth opened, but he slid a folder across the table before she could speak. Inside, receipts, transfers, screenshots, photos, pages of numbers, neatly labeled, color-coded, and dated. Every dollar, every purchase, every silent gift I had made under the name of love. She essentially subsidized your household, Mr. Parker said. Karen looked down, and for a moment, just one, I thought I saw it. Not guilt, not remorse, just panic, the kind that comes when the story you've rehearsed starts unraveling at the seams. "You said we were family," she whispered, like that word still held magic. I tilted my head. "And family doesn't forget who kept the lights on." She looked at me then, not like a daughter. More like someone seeing an opponent for the first time. "You left without a word. And then you took things from the house." I corrected her gently. "I took things I paid for. Things that were mine." She shook her head. This is insane. "You're twisting everything," Mr. Parker interjected, calm as ever. "We're simply clarifying ownership. Based on financial contributions, your mother has a claim, not just to items removed, but to the value of the property's expansion." Karen's face paled. "The sunroom?" she asked. Mr. Parker nodded. "Yes, and potentially more." She looked at me, her voice quieter now. "You never said you wanted anything back." "I didn't," I said. "Until you made it clear I was worth nothing to you unless I was working for free." She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. The silence sat heavy in the room. And then, because I am still a mother, even after everything, I added gently, "I didn't come here to punish you, Karen. I came to stop disappearing." She didn't reply. Mr. Parker tapped the file. "We can proceed formally, or you can make things right privately. That's up to you." Karen stood up slowly, the fight draining from her shoulders. "This isn't over," she said. I met her eyes. "No, it isn't. But for the first time, I get to choose how it ends." She walked out without slamming the door. And me? I stayed seated, still, strong, because the truth was finally on paper. And numbers? They don't lie. I never thought a storage unit could feel like a sanctuary. But as Lena helped me lift the last box inside, I looked around at the shelves and crates and pieces of my life that had finally been returned to my hands, and I felt something close to peace. Not everything made it here, of course. Some things had been too broken to recover. Others were too tangled up in memory to be worth taking. But what I did have, it was mine. Every chair, every framed photo, every book, blanket, and spoon. Lena leaned against the metal doorframe. "So, what now?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened a small plastic tub I hadn't dared to peek into yet. Inside, cards, old letters, and a phone number scribbled on a post-it, yellowed with time but still readable. I held it up. "Cynthia," I said. Lena's brows rose. "Your other daughter?" I nodded. We hadn't spoken in years. Not because I didn't love her, but because Karen made it complicated. Always something. "She's being dramatic," or "she said she doesn't want to come around," or "she's too busy living in the past." And like a fool, I believed her. But that little post-it had been tucked away in a drawer I never cleaned out. A part of me had held onto it, quietly, like a hope you don't say out loud. Lena didn't say a word. just nodded and handed me my phone. I dialed. It rang twice. Then a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. Hello? Cynthia, I said, my voice shaking. It's Mom. Silence. Then, oh my God. Her voice cracked. Karen told me you didn't want to see me. I sat down hard on the storage unit floor. She told me you didn't want to see me. Another pause. This one heavier. I've been sending birthday cards, Cynthia whispered. I thought you just didn't care. My throat closed. She had never stopped. I had never stopped. We had just been separated. Like a phone line that someone deliberately cut. We need to talk, I said. In person. Yes, she breathed. Please. We set a time, a place. When I hung up, I realized I was crying, but they weren't bitter tears. They were the kind that wash something clean. Lena handed me a tissue. So? She believed I abandoned her, I said. And I believed the same. Lena nodded slowly. Karen's been playing both sides. And now? Now the sides were about to meet. Not in fury, but in truth. Because what Karen didn't know, what she never imagined, was that I still had more than receipts and lawyers. I had another daughter. And I wasn't alone anymore. Cynthia's backyard hadn't changed much. Same little windmill in the garden bed. Same patio chairs we bought on clearance years ago. Same lemon tree she and Tom planted when she got her first apartment, back when things were still soft between us. But what changed was us. When she saw me, Cynthia didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around me like she was making up for every birthday, every Christmas, every silence that Karen had fed us like poison. I missed you, she whispered. I never stopped missing you, I whispered back. We sat on the patio with 2 cups of coffee and 10 years of damage between us. And we started to talk. Really talk. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. Karen had been controlling the narrative from both sides. Telling me that Cynthia was too unstable to visit. Telling Cynthia that I was too fragile to see her. Filtering every message, every card, every chance at reconciliation. She told me you were grieving too hard, Cynthia said, eyes shining with fury. She said it would hurt you if I came around. She told me you didn't want to be in my life anymore, I said quietly. We stared at each other, stunned, not by what Karen did, but by how easily we'd let her do it. I tried to visit after Dad's funeral, Cynthia said. Karen met me in the driveway and said you were sleeping and couldn't be disturbed. She told me to leave the flowers and go. I felt sick. I remember that day. I never even knew Cynthia had come. She looked down, picking at a crack in the table. I thought you blamed me for leaving. For moving away. I thought you blamed me for staying close to Karen, I said. But the truth is, I needed you. I needed you, too. We sat there, 2 grown women who'd been tricked into mourning each other while living 10 miles apart. I should have pushed harder, Cynthia said. No, I said. I should have questioned more. Then she looked me in the eye and said something I hadn't heard in so long it knocked the air out of me. I still want you in my life. Not out of guilt. Because I love you. The tears came fast this time. Not out of pain. Out of relief. Because Karen didn't just take money or labor or dignity, she tried to take connection. But she failed. And now? Now Cynthia and I were planning. Not revenge. Just the truth. The whole truth. And the day was coming, soon, when Karen would have to hear it. Not just from me, but from both of us. We picked a neutral place. Cynthia insisted. This isn't about drama, she said. It's about dignity. A quiet cafe downtown, the kind with tall windows and cloth napkins. It was early afternoon, less crowd, less noise, more room to breathe. Karen arrived late, of course. Dressed like she was walking into a boardroom. She froze when she saw Cynthia sitting next to me. She hadn't expected that. Wow, Karen said, sliding into the chair across from us. Didn't realize we were staging an ambush. I looked at her, steady. This isn't an ambush. It's a correction. Cynthia folded her hands. Her jaw was tight. You told me our mother didn't want to see me. Karen's eyes narrowed. Because she didn't. I raised my hand. That's a lie. And we both know it. Karen scoffed, playing it cool. Oh, come on. I was protecting everyone. You two were always oil and water. We were mother and daughter, Cynthia snapped. And you stood at the door and told me to go home. Karen blinked, caught off guard. I leaned forward. You didn't just use me, Karen. You isolated me. You made sure I had no one to turn to. Her voice turned sharp. I didn't make you do anything. You chose to give. You chose to move in. Don't rewrite history just because you're bitter. Cynthia's voice cut in, low but furious. She gave you everything, and you called her useless. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. Do you know how many nights I stayed up wondering if I was the bad daughter? Cynthia said, wondering why Mom wouldn't return my messages. All while you stood there acting like the martyr? Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. You don't understand what it was like, taking care of everything. The house, the kids, I was the one taking care of everything, I said. You were out with friends. You had date nights. You had rest. Because I was there. She tried to brush it off. So this is about money now? I shook my head. No, it's about the truth. Karen looked between us, realizing, maybe for the first time, that she was outnumbered, not by hostility, but by clarity. I'm not angry anymore, I told her. But I'm done letting you narrate my life. I stood up. Cynthia followed. Karen didn't stop us. She sat there, small and quiet for once, in a place where her version of the story didn't hold up anymore. As we walked out, Cynthia touched my arm and said, "That was the calmest storm I've ever seen." I nodded. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is stop whispering. And I was done whispering. The mediation office was all glass and quiet, modern, sterile, the kind of place where people pretend their lives aren't unraveling just outside the double doors. Karen was already seated when I arrived with Mr. Parker. Her lawyer sat beside her, stiff and corporate, flipping through a folder like this was just another Tuesday. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I sat down calmly, placing my own folder on the table. Mr. Parker began. As previously stated, Mrs. Whitmore is seeking either reimbursement or a property adjustment for the contributions she made toward the renovation and upkeep of her daughter's home over the course of several years. Karen cut in, arms crossed. She took things from my house. Personal items. Mr. Parker didn't flinch. Items she purchased. With her own funds. All documented here. He slid forward a stack of pages, bank transfers, receipts, dated photos. Everything in order. Karen's lawyer started flipping, his brow furrowing line by line. "This is ridiculous," Karen muttered. "She lived there. We fed her." I spoke, clear and calm. "And I cooked, cleaned, babysat, paid bills, gave you my retirement, sold my home." Her lawyer whispered something into her ear. Karen's face changed. She looked at me for the first time. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't hesitate. "Because you had a chance to love me, and instead, you used me." She went pale. "You told people I left over a chore," I continued. "You rewrote the story so you could keep being the hero." Karen looked down. Her lawyer stood abruptly. "We'll need a moment." They stepped outside. Mr. Parker leaned toward me. That was perfect. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean, like someone had finally opened a window after years of stale air. When they returned, Karen looked smaller. "We're prepared to offer a settlement," her lawyer said, his voice tight. "No public filing. No court." Mr. Parker nodded. "That's a start." Karen didn't say a word. She couldn't. Not after seeing the paper trail. Not after hearing her version of the truth crumble under real facts. I stood up, gathering my things. "I won't fight you anymore, Karen. But I won't be erased either." And just like that, it was over. Not with screaming, not with slamming doors, but with documentation, silence, and a voice that had waited too long to be heard. As I walked out, I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I was finally walking toward something, not away. The settlement wasn't flashy. No big courtroom moment. No dramatic speech. Just signatures, a notary, and a quiet agreement. Karen would release any claim to my name, any say in my finances, any hold over what remained of my inheritance. The house stayed in her name, but the extension, the sunroom, the kitchen, the space I had built, was valued, calculated, and split. I got my portion, and with it, I found something I hadn't had in years: freedom. I didn't buy another house. I wasn't trying to recreate the past. I rented a little apartment 2 blocks from Cynthia's. 2 bedrooms, a balcony, windows that caught the morning light just right. And silence. Not the suffocating kind from Karen's house, where I held my breath every time I heard her keys in the door, but true silence. The kind that lets your shoulders drop. The kind that lets you read a book without glancing at the clock every 5 minutes. Cynthia helped me unpack. She insisted on hanging my framed pictures herself. "We're keeping the good ones," she said, sorting through each photo. "No Karen drama allowed on these walls." I laughed. Really laughed. She even brought over her youngest, Maya. 5 years old, full of questions, full of sparkle. "Grandma," she said, crawling into my lap like it was the most natural thing in the world, "do you know how to make pancakes shaped like stars?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Sweetheart," I said, "I've made pancakes shaped like every letter of the alphabet." Cynthia watched us, her eyes soft. "You have space here," she said. All of it. No guilt. No conditions. And I believed her. Because for once, I wasn't being kept around out of obligation. I wasn't a live-in maid or a childminder dressed up as mom. I was wanted. I was welcome. And one night, as we were cleaning up dinner, I told Cynthia what Karen had said to me all those weeks ago. She told me I was just taking up space. Cynthia put the dish towel down. She hugged me hard. "Well," she said into my shoulder, "there's plenty of space here. And all of it's yours." I stood there, holding my daughter, knowing Tom would be proud, not because I won some legal battle, but because I found my worth again. Not in someone else's kitchen. Not in someone else's schedule. But in my own quiet, steady breath. I don't wait for permission anymore. Not to speak. Not to rest. Not to matter. That part of my life, waiting in someone else's hallway, hoping to be called into the room, it's over. Now, my mornings start with music playing low on the radio and Maya's little feet thumping down the hallway next door. Sometimes Cynthia and I have coffee on my balcony before she heads to work. Other times, I sit alone with my crossword and let the sun touch my face like it remembers me. There's no schedule, no demands, just choice, my own. The settlement came through quickly after mediation. Karen didn't drag it out, maybe because she knew the paper trail was solid, maybe because her lawyer told her the fight would cost more than it was worth. Maybe, just maybe, she knew she'd gone too far. We haven't spoken since. And that's fine. Closure doesn't always come with a bow. Sometimes it's just the absence of noise. I used my portion to furnish the apartment exactly the way I wanted. Nothing grand, just soft chairs, real curtains, and one corner that's all mine. A little armchair with Tom's fishing photo beside it. My books. My yarn. A reading lamp that leans just right. It's small, but it's mine. A neighbor drops by sometimes, Mrs. Galvez from down the hall. We swap stories. She lost her son to a bitter divorce. We don't compare pain, we just pass each other the salt and the truth. And Cynthia? Cynthia and I are building something new. Not a second chance, because this isn't a repeat. It's a beginning. She brings Maya by after school. We bake cookies that never look like the pictures but taste like love. I help with spelling. We dance in the kitchen. I even let her put stickers on my fridge. The other day, she asked if she could sleep over. Cynthia grinned. Told you she was hooked. When Maya fell asleep on my lap, I looked around my little apartment, my little kingdom, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, wholeness. Not perfection, not control, just enough of me to fill the space I'm in. I still keep that note I left on Karen's table. Not just taking up space. It's tucked into a drawer now, not because I need to remember what she said, but because I need to remember what I finally answered. Because I did take something back. Not just money, not just furniture, but myself. And the funny thing is, in claiming that, I found everything I was missing.